The space station known as Nexus hummed with activity. Beings from 100 different worlds moved through its curved corridors. In the shadowy corner of a bar called the Void's Edge, Krellick sat alone. His scaled skin reflected the dim blue lights as he nursed a drink that would kill most other species. Krellick was a Drachnian, nearly 7 feet tall with powerful muscles under armor-like scales. For 30 years, he had led the most successful mercenary crew in 3 sectors of the galaxy. His 4-fingered hand tapped on the table's surface as he waited. "Commander," a voice broke his thoughts. It was Zervac, his second-in-command, pushing through the crowd. The younger Drachnian's scales were brighter, lacking the battle scars that marked Krellick's body. "The client has arrived." Krellick nodded and stood. They moved to a private room at the back of the bar. Inside, a figure in a dark gray suit waited. The being was a Vexari, with smooth blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to absorb light. "I represent the Galactic Coalition," the Vexari said, voice soft but clear. "You may call me Kelvin." Krellick grunted. "The Coalition doesn't hire mercenaries. They have their own forces." "Times change," Kelvin replied. "Some matters require discretion." Zervac leaned forward eagerly. "What's the job?" Kelvin placed a small device on the table. It projected a hologram showing a forested moon orbiting a gas giant. "This is Tyrannus II. A human special forces team has established a base there. We need them removed." Krellick's eyes narrowed. "Humans, why not send your own troops?" "Political complications. If coalition forces engage humans directly, it could trigger diplomatic incidents. But if independent contractors handle it..." Kelvin let the implication hang in the air. "How many humans?" Zervac asked. 6, Kelvin said. Zervac laughed, the sound like rocks grinding together. 6 humans against our crew. They're soft creatures from a low-gravity world." Krellick wasn't laughing. "Payment." Kelvin named a figure that made even Zervac fall silent. "That's a lot for 6 humans," Krellick said, suspicion growing in his mind. "The Coalition values efficiency and discretion," Kelvin replied smoothly. "Do we have an agreement?" Before Krellick could answer, the door opened. Mevlina stepped in, her scales a deeper red than most Drachnians. She served as the crew's intelligence officer. "Apologies for the interruption," she said, eyes fixed on Kelvin. "Commander, I need to speak with you." Krellick nodded to Kelvin. "Consider your offer under review. We'll contact you within 1 rotation." After Kelvin left, Mevlina plugged a data crystal into the table's projector. "I've been researching human special forces. You should see this before we accept any contract." The hologram showed footage from a security camera. 3 humans in dark armor moved through a Corvidian outpost. The Corvidians were massive beings with natural armor and 4 arms, each holding a weapon. But the humans moved like water, coordinating without speaking. When the fighting started, it ended so quickly that Krellick had to replay the footage. "This was recorded 2 years ago," Mevlina said. "A team of 5 humans against 30 Corvidian guards. No human casualties." Zervac snorted. "Propaganda. Humans spread these stories to seem more dangerous than they are." "I'm not so sure," Krellick said. "The payment is too high for a simple job." "One of my contacts mentioned a human operative called Jack Miller," Mevlina continued. "He leads a team operating near the Vega sector. His specialty is counterintelligence and sabotage." Krellick stared at the frozen image of a human taking down a Corvidian twice his size. "We need more information before we decide. Send a scout team to observe these humans. No engagement." "We're wasting time," Zervac protested. "The payment means nothing if we're dead," Krellick interrupted. "Something isn't right about this contract. We watch first, then decide." As they left the room, Krellick couldn't shake the feeling that they were being pulled into something dangerous. In 30 years, he had developed instincts about jobs that were too good to be true. This contract was setting off every warning in his mind. 3 days later, Krellick and his scout team watched the humans from the dense jungle of Tyrannus II. The air was thick with moisture, and strange bird-like creatures called occasionally from the canopy above. Tickerall, the team's best scout, focused his viewing scope on the human camp. 6 of them, as the client said. They've set up a small base near the old mining complex. Krellick took the scope and studied the humans himself. They looked unimpressive compared to most species he'd encountered. Smaller than Drachnians, without natural armor or enhanced senses. Just soft, pink creatures wearing simple combat gear. "What weapons do they have?" Krellick asked. "Standard projectile rifles, some explosives. Nothing advanced," Tickerall replied. "They seem to rely more on stealth than firepower." For 2 hours, they observed the human team. Their leader appeared to be a male with short brown hair who the others called Jack. He moved with quiet confidence, constantly scanning his surroundings. A female named Dana manned a long-range rifle, checking sight lines from different positions. Another male called Sam worked with what looked like explosive devices. "They're so small," one of the younger scouts said. "How are they dangerous?" Krellick didn't answer. Something about the humans' movements bothered him. They worked with a precision that spoke of extensive training. They communicated with small hand gestures and sometimes seemed to know what the others needed without any signals at all. Suddenly, Tickerall tensed. Movement to the east. Not humans. Krellick shifted his view. A group of Corvidians was moving through the jungle toward the human camp. The massive 4-armed warriors carried heavy weapons and moved with practiced stealth. "Raiders," Krellick whispered. "At least 15 of them." The Corvidians were known mercenaries themselves, brutal and effective. They specialized in quick strikes and overwhelming force. Against 6 humans, 15 Corvidians would normally mean a slaughter. "Should we withdraw?" Tickerall asked. "If the Corvidians finish our job, we lose the payment." "We watch," Krellick ordered. "I want to see how humans fight." The Corvidians closed in on the human camp. They moved well for their size, but Krellick noticed something strange. The human sentry, Donna, wasn't reacting. She continued her casual patrol as if unaware of the approaching danger. "The humans don't see them coming," the young scout said, excitement in his voice. Krellick wasn't so sure, or they want the Corvidians to think that. The raid began with a Corvidian battle cry. The warriors charged from the jungle, weapons ready. What happened next changed Krellick's understanding of humans forever. Instead of panicking, the human team moved like parts of a single organism. Dana dropped to one knee and fired 3 precise shots, taking down the lead Corvidians. Jack rolled behind cover and emerged with a small device that he threw into the attackers' midst. It exploded not with fire but with a blinding flash and deafening sound. Sam, who had been working with explosives earlier, triggered something that caused the ground under 4 Corvidians to collapse. Paul, a quieter human Krellick had barely noticed before, appeared behind the Corvidian flank as if from nowhere. The human called Doug moved to protect a fallen comrade, while Karen maintained constant communication, coordinating their defense with hand signals and brief words. In less than 5 minutes, the Corvidian assault collapsed. 8 were down, 3 were retreating, and the humans had surrounded the remaining 4. Jack approached the largest Corvidian, who lowered his weapons in surrender. "Impossible," the young scout whispered. Tickerall looked shaken. They knew the attack was coming. They had traps prepared. Krellick watched as Jack spoke briefly with the Corvidian leader, then let the survivors retrieve their wounded and leave. The humans hadn't killed unnecessarily. "We're going back to the ship," Krellick decided. "The others need to see this." As they moved away through the jungle, Krellick replayed the battle in his mind. The humans hadn't won with superior weapons or strength. They had won with preparation, coordination, and tactical brilliance. For the first time, he understood why the contract payment was so high. These weren't just soldiers. They were something else entirely. Back on their ship, the Shadowclaw, Krelk played the recording of the human battle for his entire crew. The mess hall was packed with Drachnians, their scaled bodies pressed together as they watched the holographic display with growing disbelief. "This has to be fake," Zervac said when the recording ended. 6 humans defeating 15 Corvidians. "Impossible. I saw it with my own eyes," Tikral replied. They moved like they could read each other's minds. The crew erupted into heated debate. Some believed the footage, others called it a trick. Krelk remained silent, watching his crew's reactions. After 30 years as a mercenary, he had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts were screaming that these humans were dangerous. "Enough." Krelk's voice cut through the noise. "Mevelina, tell them what you found." The intelligence officer stepped forward, her red scales gleaming under the ship's lights. She plugged a data crystal into the holographic projector. "I've been gathering information on human special forces since we received the contract," she said. "Most species dismiss humans as weak because of their physical limitations. That is a mistake." The hologram changed to show footage from multiple sources. A human female outrunning a sylphid swarm, despite the sylphid's natural speed advantage. 2 humans holding a mountain pass against waves of attackers for 3 days without sleep. A lone human infiltrating the supposedly impenetrable Corvidian fortress and extracting a prisoner. "These incidents span the last 15 years, Mevelina continued. "Most are dismissed as human propaganda, but my sources confirm they're real." The crew grew quieter as more footage played. A human called Eric Dawson, known as the Ghost of Arcturus, had single-handedly eliminated a planetary warlord and his entire security team without being detected. Another human, Elisa Bennett, had walked unarmed into the den of the Moraxian horde to negotiate peace after her team had neutralized the horde's leadership. "There's something else," Mevelina said, her voice growing serious. "I found records of mercenary crews who took contracts against human special forces. Most never returned. Those who did were broken, physically and mentally." She displayed images of veteran mercenaries, including members of their own species, with haunted eyes and broken spirits. The few who spoke about their experiences told similar stories, Mevelina continued. The humans didn't just defeat them. They dismantled them, predicting their movements, countering their tactics, appearing where they shouldn't be able to reach. "So they're good fighters," Zervac said, though with less confidence than before. "We're better." "It's not just about fighting," Krelk finally spoke. "Watch how they move, how they communicate. They have something most species lack." The crew turned to their commander, waiting for his explanation. "Adaptability," Krelk said. "Most species rely on their natural strengths. Drachnians use our size and strength. Sylphids use their speed. Corvidians use their multiple limbs and natural armor. But humans have no overwhelming natural advantages, so they've learned to use everything around them. They turn weaknesses into strengths. They study their enemies and adapt." The mess hall fell silent as the crew considered his words. "This Jack Miller," Krelk continued, "he's appeared in multiple reports. His team specializes in counterintelligence. That means they hunt spies and infiltrators." Realization dawned on many faces. "The client," Tikral said. "They wanted us to go after a counterintelligence team." "Yes," Krelk nodded. "Which means we weren't sent to kill them. We were sent to be killed by them. Someone wants us eliminated, and is using these humans to do it." The silence deepened as the implications stank in. "So what do we do?" asked one of the younger crew members. Zervac stepped forward, his scales flushed with anger. "We strike first. Hit them before they expect it, with everything we have." Krelk looked at his second-in-command. "Is that what you took from everything we just saw? That we should attack them directly?" "We outnumber them 10-1, Zervac insisted. "Numbers didn't help the Corvidians," Mevelina pointed out. Krelk stared at the frozen image of Jack Miller calmly facing down a Corvidian twice his size. "I want to know more about why we were hired," he said. "Before we decide anything, We need to understand what game we're being used for. Krulk couldn't sleep. The ship's night cycle had begun hours ago, but he remained at his desk, reviewing the footage of the humans again and again. Something about their movements fascinated him. They fought not as individuals, but as extensions of each other. A soft chime at his door broke his concentration. "Enter," he called. Mevelina stepped in, looking troubled. "We have a problem. Zervac took a strike team to the planet's surface an hour ago." Krulk stood up so quickly his chair crashed to the floor. Without authorization, he convinced 12 crew members to join him. They believe they can overwhelm the humans with a surprise attack. She handed him a datapad. "He left this message for you." The message was brief. "When we return with the humans' heads, you'll thank me for salvaging this contract." Krulk cursed in the ancient Dracnian tongue. "Ready my shuttle. We need to stop them before." "It's too late," Mevelina said. "They're already in position. The attack begins in 20 minutes. On the surface of Tyrannus II, Zervac crouched in the dense undergrowth, watching the human camp through thermal imaging. His 12 warriors were positioned in a perfect ambush formation. They had the newest weapons, adaptive camouflage, and every advantage of preparation. "The humans are in their main shelter," he whispered to his team through their secure channel. "No signs they've detected us. Once we breach, Greltan's team will cut off their rear exit. Vrin's team will disable their communications. My team will take the primary assault." His warriors acknowledged with clicks in their comm units. They were veterans, the best fighters on the Shadowclaw. This would be over quickly. "Begin countdown," Zervac ordered. "Attack in 5 minutes." In those 5 minutes, Zervac imagined his triumphant return to the ship. Krulk would have to acknowledge his judgment. Perhaps it was time for new leadership anyway. A younger, bolder commander who wasn't afraid of soft-skinned humans. "1 minute," he whispered. His muscles tensed, ready to spring forward. Then his comm unit crackled. "Is this working?" "Hello, Zervac." The voice was calm, casual, and unmistakably human. Zervac froze. "This is Jack Miller. I hope your camouflage isn't getting too uncomfortable. Those Dracnian adaptive suits tend to overheat after about 40 minutes in humid conditions like this jungle." How did the human know they were there? How had he accessed their secure channel? "You're probably wondering how I'm talking to you right now," Jack continued as if hearing Zervac's thoughts. "Karen, our communications specialist, is quite talented. Oh, and Paul says to tell Greltan that his team's position by the western ridge is a bit exposed. 1 plasma grenade would be problematic." Panic flooded Zervac's mind. He tried to signal his team to change positions, but his comm system was no longer responding to his commands. "Here's what's going to happen," Jack's voice continued, still conversational. "In about 30 seconds, you're all going to lose consciousness. Don't worry, Doug has calibrated the gas to Dracnian physiology. You'll wake up with nothing worse than a headache." Zervac leaped to his feet, abandoning stealth. "Attack now," he shouted aloud. He took 3 steps toward the human camp before noticing a strange sweet smell in the air. His legs wobbled, his vision blurred. Around him, he heard his warriors collapsing. As darkness claimed him, his last conscious thought was that Krulk had been right after all. When Zervac awoke, he was lying on the jungle floor. His weapons were gone. His team was scattered around him, also beginning to stir. A small device sat in the center of their circle, projecting a hologram of Jack Miller. "We know who hired you," the recorded message said. "Walk away. This isn't your fight, and you're on the wrong side." The hologram showed images of their client, Kelvin, meeting with known terrorists and enemies of the Galactic Coalition. This wasn't an official coalition operation at all. "We could have killed you all," Jack's recording concluded. "Remember that when you decide what to do next." The hologram flickered off, leaving Zervac sitting in the jungle, his pride shattered along with his ambitions. Krulk stood with arms crossed as Zervac and his team stumbled back onto the Shadowclaw. They looked uninjured but deeply shaken. Their weapons were gone, and their expensive adaptive camouflage suits had been disabled, hanging useless on their frames. "Report," Krelk said, his voice cold as space. Zervac couldn't meet his commander's eyes. They knew we were coming. They knew our positions, our plan, everything. "They let you live," Krelk observed. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Zervac handed over the small hologram projector. "They sent this message. The client lied to us. Kelvin isn't working for the Galactic Coalition." Before Krelk could examine the device, Mevlina rushed into the docking bay, her scales flushed with excitement. "Commander, we're receiving a direct communication request from the human base." The crew gathered in the command center. Krelk sat in his chair, thinking carefully before accepting the transmission. The main screen flickered to life, showing the human female with short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes. "Commander Krelk," she said, "my name is Lisa Rogers, Coalition Intelligence. Thank you for accepting my call." "You're not what I expected," Krelk replied cautiously. She smiled slightly. "Captain Miller is busy securing your crew's weapons. They'll be returned before you leave the system." "Generous of him," Krelk said. "Why contact us now?" "Because we have a common enemy." Lisa's image was replaced by footage of their client, Kelvin, meeting with various beings in shadowy locations. Kelvin works for a faction called the Purity Front. They believe the Galactic Coalition has become too inclusive of what they call lesser species, primarily humans. The footage showed Kelvin receiving a case of weapons from a known terrorist cell. The Purity Front has been working to trigger conflicts between humans and other species, Lisa continued. They've orchestrated attacks on civilian targets and made them look like human military operations. Krelk felt cold anger rising in him. "And they hired us to attack you so it would look like Drachnians were responsible." "Exactly." Lisa's face returned to the screen. "If your attack had succeeded, or even if you had simply engaged us and taken casualties, it would have created a diplomatic incident. The coalition treaty with the Drachnian systems might have collapsed." "Why tell us this?" Krelk asked. "Why not just eliminate us when you had the chance?" "Because that's not how we operate," Lisa replied. "And because we need your help. Your crew has connections in places coalition intelligence can't reach. You can help us track the Purity Front's operations." Mevlina stepped forward. "The payment we were offered, it was significant." "The Purity Front is well funded," Lisa nodded. "We believe they have supporters in the highest levels of several governments. We need to find out who they are." Krelk considered his options. Working with humans went against everything mercenaries like him usually stood for, but being manipulated angered him more. "We need proof," he said finally. "Something more than your word." "Check your ship's systems," Lisa suggested. While your strike team was on the surface, the Purity Front placed a remote detonation device on your main engine. If you had attacked us and failed, they planned to destroy your ship and blame it on us. Krelk nodded to his engineer, who rushed to check. Within minutes, the Drachnian returned, holding a small black device. "It was there, Commander," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "Set to trigger remotely. It would have destroyed the entire ship." A heavy silence fell over the command center. They had nearly died, not in battle, but as disposable pawns in someone else's game. "I suggest a meeting," Lisa said. "Neutral ground. You and Captain Miller can discuss terms." "Why would Miller meet me personally?" Krelk asked. Lisa's expression turned serious. "Because he respects you, Commander. You didn't rush in. You sent observers first. You were cautious. That's rare in our experience with mercenary commanders." After she ended the transmission, Zervac approached Krelk. "You're not really considering working with humans." "I'm considering survival," Krelk replied, "and revenge against those who try to use us." He stared at the black detonator in his engineer's claws. Someone had been willing to sacrifice his entire crew. That demanded a response. The abandoned mining facility sat in a valley surrounded by dense jungle. Its metal structures were rusted and overgrown with Tyrannus Ioia's aggressive plant life. Krelk approached alone, as agreed, while his security team waited at the edge of sensor range. Inside the main building, the air was cool and still. Dust covered the old equipment. Krelk's sharp eyes scanned every corner, looking for traps or hidden observers. He found nothing obvious, but that didn't mean he was truly alone. "Commander," a voice called from the shadows. "Thank you for coming." A human male stepped into the light. He was shorter than Krelk by at least 2 feet and probably weighed less than half as much. He wore simple black clothing with no visible weapons or armor. This was Jack Miller, the human who had so thoroughly outmaneuvered Zervac. "Captain Miller," Krelk acknowledged with a slight bow of his head. "I'm surprised you came alone." Jack smiled. "Who says I did?" The implication hung in the air. Krelk knew that humans valued teamwork above individual glory. If Jack was here, his team was nearby, unseen but ready. "Lisa Rogers said you wanted to talk," Krelk said, getting to the point. Jack nodded and gestured to a pair of old cargo containers. "Please sit, and you should know that your second-in-command followed you. He's about 200 meters northeast, hiding in the ventilation shaft of the secondary processing building." Krelk's scales flushed with anger. He had ordered Zervac to remain on the ship. "How did you know?" "We've been tracking his movements since your shuttle landed," Jack said casually. "Don't worry, Nickel is keeping an eye on him. He won't interrupt us." They sat facing each other. Krelk was struck by how relaxed the human appeared, as if meeting with a Dracnian mercenary commander was an everyday occurrence. "You're not what I expected," Krelk admitted. "Most people say that about human special forces," Jack replied. "They expect big, muscular warriors with fancy weapons and fierce expressions. But that's not what makes us effective." "What does make you effective?" Jack leaned forward. "Training, preparation, adaptability. Most species rely on their natural strengths in combat. Dracnians use size and armor. Others use speed or strength or numbers. But humans, we have no overwhelming natural advantage. So we learn to use our minds." "Your minds," Krelk repeated skeptically. "Our ancestors were persistence hunters," Jack explained. "We couldn't outrun our prey, so we chased it until it collapsed from exhaustion. We couldn't outfight larger predators, so we outsmarted them with traps and tools. That mentality is in our DNA." Krelk considered this. It made a strange kind of sense. "Special Forces training takes that foundation and builds on it," Jack continued. "We learn to ignore pain, to go without sleep, to adapt to any environment. But most importantly, we learn to think like our enemies, to predict their actions before they even know what they'll do." A loud crash from outside interrupted them. Krelk tensed, reaching for his weapon. "That would be your second-in-command," Jack said without moving. "He tried to circle around to get a clear shot at me." Nickel intercepted him. The door burst open. A human female with dark hair pushed Zervac into the room. The proud Dracnian warrior looked furious and embarrassed. Nickel had disarmed him and bound his hands with some kind of restraint. "Sorry about the noise," she said to Jack. He resisted. "I came to protect the commander," Zervac growled. "You came to kill Captain Miller," Krelk corrected, his voice cold. "Against my direct orders." Jack studied Zervac with curious eyes. "You never saw Nicole coming, did you? Even though you were specifically looking for humans." Zervac didn't answer, but his silence was admission enough. "That's what I was trying to explain," Jack said to Krelk. "We're trained to be invisible when we need to be, to strike without warning, to control the battlefield regardless of the enemy's advantages." Krelk looked at Zervac, then back at Jack. "You could have killed him." "That wouldn't serve our purpose," Jack replied simply. "We need allies, not corpses." In that moment, Krelk began to understand why alien mercenaries might refuse contracts against human special forces. It wasn't just about their fighting skills. It was about how they thought. how they approached conflict itself. 2 days later, Krelk found himself doing something he never imagined possible, walking into the human camp as an ally. Jack led him past their defenses, pointing out traps and sensors that Krelk's experienced eyes had missed completely. "Your security system is impressive," Krelk admitted. "Our best scouts never detected most of these." Jack nodded. "Karen designed it. She has a gift for making the complex look simple." Inside the main structure, the rest of the human team worked at various stations. They looked up briefly as Krelk entered, then returned to their tasks. Only their subtle repositioning revealed their wariness of the Drachnian in their midst. Lisa Rogers approached with a datapad. "We've identified 3 possible locations where Kelvin might be operating from. Each is officially listed as a scientific outpost, but our intelligence suggests they're Purity front bases." Krelk examined the information. "The one in the Cirrus Nebula. My crew delivered supplies there 6 months ago. It's heavily defended for a scientific facility." "That matches our assessment," Lisa nodded. "The problem is, we can't approach any of these locations without being detected. Coalition ships are too easily identified." "But a mercenary vessel," Krelk understood immediately. "Exactly," Jack said. "Your ship could approach without raising alarms. We need to confirm which base is their primary headquarters before we can shut down their operation." Krelk considered the plan. "My crew won't like working with humans." "They don't have to like it," Lisa replied. "They just have to understand what's at stake. The Purity Front doesn't just want to eliminate humans. They want to tear apart the Coalition and return to the days of interspecies warfare." A tall human male approached with a small device. "Commander," he said respectfully, "I'm Ryan Peters, tactical specialist. With your permission, I'd like to share some techniques that might help your team when we go in." For the next hour, Ryan showed Krelk human methods for silent movement, hand signals, and coordinated strikes. They were surprisingly simple but effective. Krelk began to see how humans used minimal communication to maximum effect. Meanwhile, in another part of the camp, Mevelina was working with Karen to analyze communication patterns from the suspected bases. The two had formed an unexpected bond over their shared love of pattern recognition. "Your species processes information differently than ours," Mevelina observed. "You see connections where we see only random data." Karen smiled. "And you see details we would miss. That's why we're better together than apart." By evening, a joint plan had been formed. The Shadowclaw would approach the Cirrus Nebula base, claiming to need emergency repairs. Jack and 3 of his team would be hidden aboard. Once inside, they would gather evidence of the Purity Front's plans. As they finalized the details, Doug, the human medic, approached Krelk with a small case. "I've prepared these for your crew," he explained, opening it to reveal injectors filled with blue liquid. "It's an antitoxin. The Purity Front has been known to use nerve agents specifically designed for Drachnian physiology." Krelk stared at the medic. "You created an antitoxin for my species." Doug nodded. "I studied Drachnian biology after our first encounter, just in case we needed to help rather than harm." This small gesture affected Krelk more than he expected. His entire career, he had seen humans as either targets or clients, never as beings who would prepare medicine to protect his crew. Later, as Krelk returned to his ship to brief his team, he found Zervac waiting at the shuttle bay. His second-in-command had been quiet since his failed assassination attempt. "The crew will follow your orders," Zervac said stiffly. "But many don't understand why we're helping humans." "Neither did I, until today," Krelk replied. "We're not helping them because they're humans. We're helping them because they're right, and because they could have killed us all, but chose not to." He walked past Zervac toward the command center, where his crew waited. He had to make them understand what he was only beginning to grasp himself. That strength came in many forms, and sometimes the most dangerous weapon was a mind that could outthink its enemies. 3 weeks later, Krelk stood on the observation deck of the Shadowclaw, watching the stars. The mission to the Cirrus Nebula had been successful beyond expectations. Not only had they gathered evidence of the Purity Front's plans, but they had also exposed the faction's leaders, including 3 high-ranking coalition officials. The door slid open behind him. Jack Miller walked in, wearing civilian clothes instead of his tactical gear. He looked smaller, almost ordinary, yet Krelk knew better now. "The coalition fleet has secured the last Purity Front base," Jack said. "Kelvin is in custody along with most of their leadership." "Good," Krelk nodded. "They tried to use my crew as disposable pawns. That debt needed to be paid." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the distant nebula's colors shift and swirl. "Your crew performed well," Jack finally said. "When the base security systems detected us, I thought we might have to fight our way out. But your team's distraction was perfectly timed." "We followed your tactical approach," Krelk admitted. "Small teams, minimal communication, adaptive response. My warriors were skeptical at first, but they can't argue with the results." Jack smiled slightly. "Ryan says Medalina has a natural talent for special operations. She thinks 3 steps ahead." "She always has," Krelk said with pride. "That's why she's my intelligence officer." Another silence fell between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was the quiet understanding of warriors who had faced danger together. "There's something I've wanted to ask you," Krelk said. "With your capabilities, why don't humans dominate the coalition? Why share power with species that once doubted you?" Jack considered the question seriously. "We've learned from our own history that victory and peace aren't the same thing. On our homeworld, we fought countless wars against each other. The winners often created the conditions for the next conflict." He turned to face Krelk directly. "Real security doesn't come from dominating others. It comes from building systems where everyone has a stake in maintaining peace." Krelk thought about this. It was not how Dracnians traditionally viewed strength, but he couldn't deny the wisdom in it. The next day, as the humans prepared to leave, Lisa Rogers presented Krelk with an official document. "The Coalition has authorized a substantial reward for your assistance," she explained. "It's been transferred to your ship's accounts." Krelk accepted the document with a nod of thanks. The payment would keep his crew content, though money wasn't why he had helped in the end. Jack approached with one final gift, a small data crystal. "This contains information about our tactical approaches, training methods, and strategic thinking," he said. "Not as a threat, but as a gift between respected warriors." Krelk accepted the crystal with surprise. "You're sharing your advantages. Knowledge should be shared with those wise enough to use it properly," Jack replied. "Your crew proved themselves worthy allies." As the human shuttle departed, Zervac stood beside Krelk on the bridge. The second-in-command had changed during their time with the humans, becoming more thoughtful and less impulsive. "What now, Commander?" he asked. Krelk studied the data crystal in his hand. "Now we return to our work, but with new rules." In the months that followed, Krelk's crew became known for their unusual code. They refused all contracts against human special forces. When asked why, Krelk would tell the story of Tyrannus III and explain that those who hired against humans inevitably turned out to be on the wrong side of history. Other mercenary crews mocked this stance at first, but as time passed and more stories spread about human special forces capabilities, the code was adopted by other commanders. Eventually, it became an unwritten rule throughout the mercenary guilds. Accept any contract you wish against any species in the galaxy. But if the target is human special forces, walk away. Not because they cannot be defeated, but because those who stand against them rarely deserve to win. And so, across the stars, the legend of human special forces grew, not through conquest, but through respect earned one encounter at a time.